Intro. What if you weren't welcome in the world you built? Have you ever walked into a place you created only to feel like you didn't belong? Now imagine building a luxury empire from nothing. You gave it your heart, your name, your every sleepless night. But when you arrive unannounced, dressed like any other guest, the crew doesn't recognize you. Worse, they overlook you, dismiss you, push you aside, not because you're invisible, but because you don't look like who they're trained to serve. That's what happened to Sophia Raynor, a black woman, a CEO, and the quiet architect of one of the world's most elite six-star yachts. Faced with whispers, cold shoulders, and silent bias, she made a choice: stay silent or go undercover to face the truth of her own company. If it were you, what would you do? This is not just a story about power or privilege. It's a story about courage, clarity, and what happens when leadership means letting go of comfort to fight for justice. Come aboard. Let the story begin. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe true change starts with the courage to look deeper. Your journey into the Undercover CEO starts now. The heat in Florida that morning wasn't the usual kind. It clung to the air like a secret waiting to be told. Seagulls circled lazily over the marina, where the Isla Mariner, the most prestigious six-star yacht in the Atlantic Fleet, stood shimmering under the sun like a silver dream. Sophia Raynor stood at the edge of the dock, a simple weekender bag slung over her shoulder. Her linen blouse fluttered slightly in the breeze, her wide-brimmed hat tilted just so. No makeup, no entourage. Just a woman with tired eyes and a quiet kind of power. She took one step toward the gangway. "Ma'am, excuse me." A sharp voice cut through the breeze. A man in a neatly pressed security uniform stood blocking her path. His badge read, "Robert," and his smile never touched his eyes. "This area's restricted to Isla Mariner guests only." Sophia tilted her head, her voice calm. "I am a guest." Name, he snapped, already scrolling through his iPad. "Kara Dawson," she replied smoothly, the alias she'd registered under. Her real name wouldn't be found on any guest list today. Robert frowned. No VIP transport, no assistant, no ID. His tone was more suspicion than inquiry. Sophia offered a small smile. "I like to travel light." He scoffed. "Look, ma'am, I don't know who you think you are, but people don't just walk onto this yacht." And that's when it happened. Another car pulled up behind her, a glossy but overpriced vehicle. A young white couple stepped out, laughing, their matching suitcases rolling behind them. Robert's entire demeanor changed. "Mr. and Mrs. Langston, welcome back to the Isla." He rushed forward to help them with their bags, all but bowing. Sophia stepped aside, silent. As the couple ascended the gangway, Robert returned, eyeing her now like a problem to solve. "You'll need to wait over there while I verify your booking." He didn't look at her again. Sophia walked a few steps back, stood near a post with peeling paint, and watched the scene unfold like a play she'd seen before. Her breath was steady, but inside, something heavy shifted, not because she hadn't been believed, not because she'd been brushed aside, but because this was her ship, her company, her legacy, and somehow, somewhere, it had rotted from within. She had known things were off: the uptick in passenger complaints, the subtle drop in ratings, the HR reports that said little but implied much. Still, she had hoped it wasn't this bad, that the cracks in the system could be patched, that maybe it was just a few bad apples, like people always said. But no, it was more than that. When Robert finally returned, begrudgingly confirming her reservation, he didn't offer an apology. Just a clipped nod and a bored wave toward the gangway. Sophia stepped aboard. The air smelled of citrus and salt and something perfumed. A young woman in a navy dress greeted her with a practiced smile, but her eyes flicked quickly past Sophia toward the other guests. No champagne flute offered. No welcome to the Isla. Sophia moved forward quietly, each step echoing with memory and disappointment. She remembered when she chose the flooring, the curve of the staircase, the chandelier from Venice. She remembered building this brand from nothing, and now she was invisible. She checked in under Kara Dawson, was given a mid-level cabin despite her special request, and left to find her own way through corridors she designed. Later that evening, as the yacht began to pull away from the dock, she stood alone on the observation deck. Below her, laughter rang out from the upper-tier lounge. Glasses clinked. Crew members circled white guests with charm and urgency. Sophia pulled her shawl tighter and closed her eyes. She hadn't come here to punish. She'd come to understand. And now, she was beginning to. Sophia Raynor didn't always belong in boardrooms or have her name engraved on the side of luxury vessels. She came from the south side of Chicago. Her mother was a nurse who worked double shifts. Her father disappeared before she could spell his name. Most nights. Dinner was boxed macaroni and conversations were short. Her mother's eyes were always tired, but her hands warm and steady held Sophia through storms she didn't yet understand. She remembered being told she was too much, too serious, too direct, too dark-skinned to be the face of anything glamorous. She also remembered the day she stopped apologizing for any of it. Sophia was 26 when she started Raynor Voyages with a single retrofitted riverboat and a loan she didn't sleep over for weeks. By 38, she had won Maritime Design Awards, appeared in Fortune magazine, and launched Isla Mariner, her crown jewel. But in the last 2 years, something had shifted. She stopped getting invited to certain meetings. Her VP of Operations, a charming man named Doyle, had once whispered after a guest meeting, "Let's not be too visible on this one. Sophia, the client leans old money." Sophia remembered how that sentence wrapped around her spine like ice. She'd built an empire, but in rooms where privilege was the currency, even empires could be politely erased. So she took a step back, watched, listened, hired external auditors, launched anonymous passenger surveys. And what came back to her wasn't fire and brimstone. It was worse. It was silence, vague complaints, passengers who didn't feel seen, quiet trends in feedback that, taken alone, meant little, but together they painted a picture she couldn't ignore. Discretionary service bonuses always went to the same crew. Minority passengers were routinely offered fewer surprise perks, and complaints from non-white guests took longer to resolve. Sophia brought it to her leadership team. They smiled, nodded, promised to look into it. Then, nothing changed. So she decided to disappear. She took a sabbatical. Let Doyle handle press. Let the face of the company fade. And quietly, under the name Kara Dawson, she booked a week-long passage aboard her own pride, the Isla Mariner. It wasn't a stunt. It wasn't vengeance. It was grief. And a test. She needed to know how deep the rot went. She needed to feel it for herself, to understand what it felt like to walk these decks without the armor of her title. And now, one day, she already had her answer. That evening, Sophia sat on the narrow veranda outside her cabin. Her cabin was decent, but she could feel the difference. No complimentary wine, no handwritten welcome note, no staff member offering to walk her to dinner. She wore a simple navy dress, the same one she'd worn for interviews when she was just getting started. Her hair was pulled back in a low twist not styled to impress, just to be out of the way. She'd kept her real wedding ring in a drawer back home. That chapter, the short, painful marriage, the miscarriage, the silence was something she rarely revisited. But tonight, in the stillness of her private deck, it came flooding back. People assumed powerful women didn't bleed, but Sophia bled, quietly, and healed, quietly. Now she stood at the edge of everything she'd built, wondering if she had loved it blindly for too long. The intercom pinged softly. Dinner was being served on deck 2. She stood, composed herself, and stepped back inside. The dining lounge shimmered with golden light. Crystal chandeliers threw soft refractions across polished wood floors. The staff moved like dancers, well-rehearsed and precise. Sophia took a seat at a table near the window. No one came. Other tables were being fussed over, napkins adjusted, menus described, smiles wide. 10 minutes passed. 15. A young couple was seated beside her, both white, both wrapped in crisp resort linens. They were greeted instantly. Champagne. "Would you like the chef's recommendations?" Sophia watched quietly, her fingers folded neatly in her lap. Then a man slid into the seat across from her. Older, dignified, salt and pepper hair. He wore a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up and had a walking cane leaning against his chair. "You look like someone who's wondering if the menu has anything that bites back," he said with a chuckle. Sophia cracked a small smile. "Just wondering if I'm invisible." The man raised his glass. "Then I guess I'm seeing ghosts." They laughed, lightly. "I'm Gregory Cheney," he said, offering his hand. "This is my 6th voyage on the Isla. Sophia, I mean, Kara." She stumbled, corrected herself. He raised an eyebrow, then let it go. "I know the rhythms here," he continued. "The smiles, the nods, the ones who look through you. You've noticed too," she asked. He nodded. "When you've worn this skin for 70 years, you learn to clock the glances, the delay in service, the polite apologies with no eye contact." Sophia leaned in, her voice softer. "Why keep coming back?" "Because I love the sea," he said simply. "And because I want to believe places can change. People can, too." Sophia stared at him for a long moment. She'd built this place to be different, to be the exception, and somehow, it had become exactly what she once vowed to fight. Her food never came that night. She and Gregory shared a quiet drink and stories of cities they'd loved and memories they hadn't told anyone in years. And when he finally stood to leave, he looked back at her with knowing eyes. "Be careful, Ms. Dawson," he said. She nodded. "I will." But inside, Sophia Raynor already knew. Careful wouldn't be enough anymore. The next morning dawned soft and gray. A mist clung to the sea like it was unsure whether to stay or vanish. Sophia stood on the deck just after sunrise, a steaming cup of black coffee in her hands. The mug had no logo, no flair, just ceramic and heat. She liked that. Simplicity always told the truth. From this height, the ocean stretched in every direction, endless and indifferent. A perfect metaphor, she thought. The sea didn't care who you were, only how you sailed it. Voices began to rise below, crew members getting ready for the day. The soft buzz of early risers chatting over breakfast. Sophia didn't go down right away. She needed time to settle, to watch. This was not her first ocean, not the first time she had to dive beneath the surface to find what others were too polite to name. When she finally arrived at the dining lounge, the room was humming. Morning light poured through massive windows, and the smell of fresh pastries mixed with salt and citrus. Sophia moved to the buffet. A tall young man behind the omelet station barely glanced at her. She stood waiting. He took the order of a woman who walked up after her, white, mid-40s, hair like bottled platinum. Sophia gently cleared her throat. He looked up, startled, then gave her a flat nod. "What would you like?" She smiled politely. 3-egg omelet, spinach, mushrooms, no cheese. He nodded, but his hands moved mechanically. "No? Good morning? No warmth?" She stepped aside, noticing the staff interactions around the room. A young Latina stewardess laughed freely with a group of white guests. Their server poured mimosas with enthusiasm. 2 black women in the far corner, dressed elegantly, waited 10 minutes for a refill. One eventually stood to flag someone down. Sophia noticed how the staff avoided their eyes, then quickly responded when beckoned but never offered help first. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't loud. That's what made it dangerous. It was the kind of bias that hid behind smiles, that lived in body language and long silences. It was in the delay, in the absence of grace. Sophia took her plate and sat outside, letting the sea calm her thoughts. Later that afternoon, she wandered the lower decks, the ones rarely seen in promotional brochures, the sun deck, the boutique spa, the midship library. She stopped in front of a glass case displaying vintage maritime instruments, sextants, barometers, journals from past voyages. She had personally curated it. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Don't see many guests admiring that display," the voice said, light but slightly awkward. She turned. It was Kai, the young bartender, early 20s, mixed race, clean cut, nervous energy around his eyes. "I always liked it," Sophia replied. "It reminds me that navigation isn't always about speed. Sometimes it's about knowing where you really are." Kai smiled, almost surprised. "You a sailor? In another life? Maybe?" He looked around, lowered his voice. "Sorry about earlier. I think I saw you at dinner last night. Looked like nobody came to your table." Sophia paused. This was a risk, but something in his face unsure, but honest made her answer. "Yeah, I noticed that too." Kai hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "It happens. Not always on purpose. Just, you know, some folks don't see it until it happens to them." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Do you see it?" He looked down, then back at her. "I do now." Their eyes held for a moment. "I've been thinking about quitting," he said, almost whispering. "Doesn't feel right, the way things are. But it's hard to speak up here." Sophia nodded. "It usually is." He smiled again, more timid this time. "If you're staying for the full cruise, maybe I'll get to make you a real drink, not just the watered-down stuff we save for people they assume won't notice." She blinked. "You do that?" He flushed. "Not me. But, yeah, it happens." Sophia wanted to scream, not at him, at the whole damn system. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a simple notebook, the one she'd started when she boarded. No logos, no company stamps, just ink and silence. She scribbled a note. "What's your full name?" Kai Ellison." She nodded, tore off the page, and folded it. "Keep this," she said, handing it to him. He looked down. 4 words. "Don't quit just yet." And beneath that, a phone number. He looked up, confused. "You're not who I think you are. Are you?" Sophia smiled. Small but firm. "Not yet." That evening, the yacht hosted a formal cocktail hour. Guests were encouraged to dress nautical, whatever that meant. White trousers and navy collars flooded the lounge. Champagne towers glistened beside a string quartet playing a delicate version of Moon River. Sophia wore a black pantsuit and flats. No jewelry. She stood near the back wall, observing. Gregory was there too, this time leaning against the bar with an untouched drink. They exchanged a nod. She scanned the room. Captain Marcus Ellery entered tall, square-jawed, salt-gray hair, his uniform pristine, his gaze scanning the crowd without warmth. He didn't see her, or rather, he saw her the way he saw the carpet, something functional, unremarkable. Tina Morales, the chief stewardess, followed close behind him, mid-40s, always poised. Her smile had the precision of a scalpel. Sophia watched as Tina guided two guests clearly affluent, clearly white, to the front row seats near the live music. A black family stood nearby, holding their drinks, unsure of where to sit. No one offered. Sophia's pulse slowed, not from fear, from focus. She was getting close. One more day, maybe two, and she'd see the whole map. But tonight, she'd wait, because the tide wasn't done turning yet. By the third day, the Isla Mariner had begun to reveal itself, not the polished tours and curated experiences, but the quiet choreography of favoritism that played out behind champagne smiles. Sophia had learned to move like water, unseen, unbothered. It was a skill sharpened long before she had ever set foot on a yacht. She walked the corridors slowly that morning, her fingertips grazing the mahogany rails she once selected from a craftsman in Italy. She remembered the way he described the wood as strong, elegant, built for storms. At the time, it had felt like a metaphor for herself. Now, those same rails felt cold, ornate, but indifferent. At breakfast, she sat alone again. A couple near her middle-aged vacation tan spoke loudly about their private tasting scheduled that evening. They had already received 2 handwritten invitations since boarding. Sophia had received none. When she asked a passing waiter, a young South Asian man, about the optional excursions, he responded with a curt, "Reservations are usually made in advance," and walked away. Sophia noticed how he greeted the next table, a group of guests dressed in country club polos. His tone lifted. He leaned in, joked about the wine list, offered suggestions with a smile. She closed her menu without ordering. Later, on the spa level, she requested a treatment. The receptionist, blonde and tight-lipped, gave her a once-over before politely informing her they were booked for the day. Behind the desk, Sophia could clearly see at least 2 empty rooms on the schedule. "You might have more luck tomorrow," the woman added with a smile that said nothing at all. Sophia returned to her cabin in silence. Her suite was well-appointed, soft sheets, gentle lighting, fresh orchids changed daily. On the surface, everything whispered luxury. But beneath the silken touches was a pervasive chill. Luxury, it turned out, had a face, and it wasn't hers. That evening, Sophia attended the wine pairing event. Guests were dressed to impress. The air was thick with lavender cologne and crisp ambition. Sophia spotted Gregory near the back, already seated, a plate of untouched cheese before him. She sat beside him quietly. "Tough crowd tonight," he said, glancing around. "Hard to tell who's performing and who's just paying." She replied. He chuckled. "Maybe both." The sommelier, a tall Frenchman with a theatrical flair, moved through the room explaining each pour in detail. When he reached Sophia's table, he hesitated. "I'll come back to you," he said, then turned swiftly to the group beside them, diving into a monologue about Burgundy vintages. Gregory raised an eyebrow. "You think he'll come back?" Sophia didn't answer, but her heart was already answering for her loud and low, like a drumbeat beneath the wine and violins. Back in her suite, Sophia removed her earrings slowly. She caught her reflection in the mirror. The same strong jaw, the same unflinching eyes, but behind them, fatigue, not just of the body, but of the soul. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared out at the water. There was a time when she believed in merit, that excellence would earn you entry, that good work spoke for itself. But in rooms like these, elegant, exclusionary, she saw the lie behind that belief. It wasn't about work. It was about being expected, and she had never been expected. There was a knock on her door. She opened it to find a folded note on the floor. She unfolded it. Just 4 words, handwritten, lounge deck, midnight, alone, no name, just a time and place. Sophia felt a jolt of caution, but something deeper, curiosity. Maybe hope tugged at her ribs. At midnight, the yacht was silent. She moved through the corridors like a shadow, her soft-soled shoes making no sound against the carpet. The lounge deck was dimly lit, reserved for late-night thinkers. As the brochure had once boasted, Kai was waiting. He looked nervous but determined, his bartender apron gone, replaced with a plain hoodie and jeans. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either," Sophia replied. He gestured to a chair. "Can I talk?" She nodded. "I started here because I needed work. Tips were good, looked classy on paper. But after the first month, I started to notice things." He paused. "People who looked like me or you getting passed over. The staff calling it just how the guests prefer it. Management turning blind eyes. Tina. She controls a lot more than service. She rewards who follows the unspoken rules." Sophia listened, her hands folded tightly. Kai continued, voice low. "I tried to say something. Once, to a supervisor. I was told I was overreacting, that I should be grateful to work here at all." He looked at her directly now. "But then I saw you. Not just the way you were treated, but the way you watched. You weren't surprised." She nodded. "No, I wasn't. You built this place, didn't you?" The question was more like a statement. Sophia's silence answered for her. Kai's shoulders dropped, a kind of sad admiration softening his face. "You didn't come to enjoy the cruise," he said. "You came to fix it." She sighed. "I came to understand what broke." They sat in silence for a moment, the sea hushing around them. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why leave that note?" He smiled slightly. "Because I figured someone needed to say it, and I thought maybe you still believed this place could be better." Sophia blinked slowly. "I don't know yet," she whispered. Kai nodded. "Then let me help you find out." Back in her suite, Sophia opened her notebook and began writing. Not just observations, but names. Not just behaviors, but systems. She wrote until dawn began to creep into the sky, streaking the sea with gold. Tomorrow, she would go deeper, into the crew quarters, into the conversations behind closed doors, and into the parts of herself that still held hope. Because what lay ahead wasn't just confrontation. It was the question she hadn't dared to ask before. Can something be saved when the people meant to protect it are the ones who broke it? The next morning, the Isla Mariner anchored off the coast of a secluded island, a planned stop along the cruise's route. It was advertised as an exclusive day of leisure, complete with private beach access, gourmet picnic baskets, and a string quartet flown in just for the occasion. Sophia stood on the upper deck, watching as the staff prepared to escort the guests to shore. The tender's small transport boats were being loaded with champagne, branded umbrellas, and beach towels folded like swans. But even from this distance, she noticed the difference. The first boat was filled with white guests. Attendants hovered over them, adjusting sunglasses, offering sunscreen with enthusiastic smiles. The next group, which included a black couple and a Middle Eastern family, was met with quiet nods and minimal interaction. The staff didn't offer to help them with their bags. No chilled drinks were passed around. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Privilege, she had learned, was often about what wasn't offered. Down by the pool bar, she found Kai restocking glassware. He didn't notice her at first. "Kai?" she said softly. He looked up, startled, then relaxed into a familiar expression. "Morning. Thought you might have left." "Not yet," she replied, "but I'm seeing more." He wiped his hands on a towel and nodded toward the beach. "You notice who gets which boat I did?" He exhaled. "It's all unspoken. No one writes it down. But everyone knows who's supposed to get what. Tina doesn't need to say it out loud. Her expectations are understood." Sophia sat on a stool. The bar was quiet, guests mostly off on excursions. She looked around before asking, "Has she ever said something directly?" Kai hesitated. "One time, a new hire, a kid from Atlanta, offered a complimentary spa voucher to a woman who didn't fit the brand image." Tina pulled him aside, said he was misrepresenting the guest experience. And by that, she meant Kai gave a small, bitter smile. Wrong skin tone, wrong last name. Sophia leaned in, her voice low. "What did he do?" "He quit. The next day. Said he couldn't smile through it anymore." There was a long pause between them. Sophia stared at the bottle labels lying behind the bar, the ones she had selected herself years ago. She remembered choosing brands based not only on quality but on stories, family-owned distilleries, sustainable farms. She had wanted every detail of the Isla Mariner to mean something. Now, those bottles sat cold under fluorescent lights, their stories forgotten. Kai broke the silence. "You know, when I started here, I used to love this place. I thought it was magic. People happy, music every night, the sea stretching forever. But after a while, it felt like I was pouring drinks for a dream I didn't belong in." Sophia looked at him, her voice softer now. "Why do you stay?" He shrugged. That shrug, so small, yet so full of resignation, hit her like a wave. "Because if I leave," he said, "then who's left to witness it?" Later that day, Sophia joined the guests on the island. The setting was surreal, palm trees swaying, classical music echoing across the sand, waiters in white carrying trays of lobster salad. She walked slowly, barefoot, letting the warm sand ground her. Near the tree line, she saw Gregory seated under a canopy, watching the others. A book sat open on his lap, though he wasn't reading. "Mind if I join?" she asked. He smiled and motioned to the seat beside him. "You didn't strike me as the beach type." "Not lately," she replied, "but I needed to see it." He looked around. "It's beautiful, but beauty doesn't always tell the truth. Does it?" "No," she said, scanning the scene. "Sometimes it hides it." They sat in silence for a while, the ocean rolling in steady rhythm. "I spoke with one of the bartenders this morning," Sophia said finally. "He's young, observant, tired of what he sees." Gregory nodded slowly. "Tired is where change begins. But it can't stop there." She turned to him. "You've been coming here for years. Why not speak up?" His eyes didn't leave the horizon. "Because I wanted to believe it would correct itself. That maybe if I stayed quiet, stayed polite, the place would evolve." He looked at her now. "But it hasn't. And I think it won't unless someone breaks the silence." Sophia felt the weight of that sentence settle in her chest. "You think that someone is me?" she said. "I know it is." That evening, back on the yacht, there was a staff meeting in the service galley. Sophia, still under the name Kara Dawson, lingered just outside the corridor. She wasn't allowed in. Not yet, but she could hear enough. Tina's voice carried, sharp and controlled. "I don't care who you feel deserves what. You stick to the guest profiles. VIPs are top tier, they get priority. If there's ever any confusion, come to me. Do not freelance." Sophia's jaw tightened. Another voicemail. Uncertain asked, "What if a guest complains?" Tina responded quickly. "Then you apologize. But don't escalate. Don't ever put it in writing unless you want HR crawling into your schedule." The room murmured in understanding. Sophia stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the hallway. She felt something fracture inside. Not rage, not yet, but the slow cracking of the last illusion she had left that good people could hold up a broken system without becoming part of the break. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window, writing, one hand gripping her pen, the other flat against her chest, as if to keep her heart steady. She was almost ready, not to explode, but to lead. And leading meant more than firing people. It meant facing them, one by one, with truth, with history, with the weight of everything they'd tried not to see. The walls were narrower below deck, the air denser, the lighting harsher, fluorescent and unflattering, humming like a tired secret. Sophia Raynor had walked these corridors before as a CEO on quarterly inspections, smiling beside department heads, nodding through crew briefings, but never like this. Not as Kara Dawson, not as a shadow. This time, she wasn't escorted, no schedule, no heads up to staff, just a simple black hoodie, soft-soled sneakers, and her own quiet intent. She moved like memory familiar, but unnoticed. She passed laundry rooms first hot, rhythmic with steam and the scent of bleach. Then the engine control corridors, all metal and codes and pulsing screens. Then came the crew bunks, not the private suites you'd find on brochures. No, these were cramped quarters, shared walls, shared lockers, voices low, movement calculated. She paused near a maintenance door, hearing laughter inside. Not joyful, but bitter. A kind of laugh that only followed a cruel joke. She leaned closer. So she actually asked for a foot massage. A voice said, "Male, mid-20s. Was she one of the good ones?" Another asked, sarcasm sharp as glass. A third voice chimed in, female this time. "Nah. One of them? You know, the kind that act like they belong in first class just 'cause they're dressed nice." The room broke into low snickers. Sophia's stomach turned. She stepped back slowly, the fluorescent flicker overhead casting her shadow long and trembling. Farther down, she passed the service staff quarters, the stewardess break area. The door was cracked open. Inside, Tina Morales sat with a tablet on her lap, reviewing something. Another woman, younger, was pacing. She complained again. The younger woman said, Tina didn't look up. "Which one?" Cabin 421. The black woman. She said she waited 20 minutes for breakfast service. Tina sighed. It's always unseen. That's the new word. Right, invisible, marginalized. Whatever the complaint is this time, she wants to talk to someone in management. Tina closed the tablet, her voice lowered. Do not escalate. Tell her the manager is off duty and offer her wine. That usually resets them. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. Not from fear, from fury too carefully contained for years. She could feel it now in every word, every smirk, every dismissive tone. It was a system, not an accident, not a misunderstanding, a design. She didn't return to her suite right away. Instead, she sat in the crew hallway, legs pulled to her chest, notebook in her lap. She wrote names, incidents, tone shifts, patterns. And for the first time in her professional life, her hand shook while doing so. She was raised to believe in process, in policy. That integrity could be written into code, but what she had heard wasn't a broken policy. It was cruelty passed down like inheritance. That evening, Sophia stepped onto the observation deck just before dusk. The horizon bled orange and pink. For a moment, she let the breeze cool the heat inside her chest. Gregory Cheney found her there, as if he knew. He stood beside her, silent at first. Then, "You went below, didn't you?" She nodded. He looked out over the sea. "I could have told you what you'd hear, but it wouldn't have meant the same. I thought I was ready," she said quietly, "and I was wrong." He offered her a small smile. "Then you're getting close." She turned to him. "To what?" "To the truth," he said, "and maybe to what comes after it." Later that night, Sophia received a message slipped under her door. No name, just a simple note, "Come to the staff lounge. After final check-in, we need to talk." She arrived just after midnight. The lounge wasn't large beige couches, a worn TV mounted on the wall, a coffee maker sputtering to life in the corner. It smelled of sleep and stress. Kai was there, and so were two others, Maria, a housekeeper Sophia remembered vaguely from early days, and Javi, a maintenance worker with kind eyes and oil-stained nails. Kai stood. "We've been talking, quietly, for months." Sophia sat. "About patterns, favoritism, what Tina doesn't say, but expects," Maria added. "They don't care what we think, but we see it all. Who gets the turn-down gifts? Who gets overlooked for perks?" Javi nodded. "And the way we're told to act. It's not just the guests being treated differently. We are, too." Sophia looked at them, these crew members, worn but awake, fragile but fierce. "What do you want me to do?" she asked softly. Kai looked her in the eye. "Tell us we're not crazy, that we're right to want something better." Sophia didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her ID, the official one, with her full name and title embossed in gold. She placed it on the table. For a long second, no one breathed. Maria blinked. Javi leaned forward. Kai exhaled like he'd been holding it for days. "I knew it," he said. Sophia met their eyes one by one. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're absolutely right." The room went quiet again. But it wasn't silence anymore. It was beginning. And beginnings had power. Morning came not with peace, but with purpose. Sophia Raynor dressed differently that day, not in designer linens or muted luxury, but in black plain slacks, a buttoned shirt, flat shoes. Her hair, tied back into a low knot, framed a face that had decided enough. She didn't call for security. She didn't summon anyone to her side. She simply walked through the decks, past the smiling faces, past the neatly stacked croissants and imported fruit, past the illusion. Words spread fast, not from her lips, but from the silence that moved ahead of her. Some staff paused mid-conversation as she passed. Others looked away, instinctively uneasy without knowing why. There was something in her walk, the pace, the stillness behind her eyes that told them the mask had come off. She made her way to the staff break room just after the breakfast rush. It was the same room where they whispered judgments, passed quiet laughter about who was worth serving and who was not. She opened the door and waited. It didn't take long. Tina Morales entered first, flanked by two department heads. Then came the rest, a slow trickle of uniforms and hesitant expressions. The galley staff, the spa attendants, housekeeping, waiters, stewards, engineers. The room filled with tension. Sophia stood near the center. No podium, no title, just her and them. She let the silence grow thick before speaking. "Some of you know me as Kara Dawson," she began, her voice even. A few exchanged glances, but that name was a mirror I held up to this place. A test. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ID again, the one with her real name, the one with weight. "I am Sophia Raynor, founder, CEO, the woman who built this company from scratch." A stunned pause rippled through the room. Tina's face went pale, her jaw clenched. Jason, the logistics officer, stepped back, visibly. Someone dropped a spoon, but no one spoke. Sophia continued, "I came aboard to see something for myself. Not numbers, not spreadsheets. Behavior, culture, the things you can't fix with a meeting or a memo." She paused, locking eyes with Tina, and I saw everything. The first words came from Kai. He stepped forward, quiet but sure. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it cracked the dam. Maria nodded, visibly shaken. Javi looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. Then Tina spoke. "This is highly irregular," she said, her voice stiff. "You've misrepresented yourself to the crew and the guests. There are protocols." Sophia held up her hand. "No. What's irregular is a staff trained to serve with precision but allowed to discriminate with subtlety. What's irregular is guests being judged by their skin before they even sit down for dinner." "What's irregular," she said, turning slowly to face the group, "is a culture that rewards smiles for some and silence for others." A few eyes dropped. A few postures shifted. Jason stepped forward, defensive. "We've been under pressure. Staffing is tight. Guests have expectations, and you have standards." Sophia cut in. "Or at least you should." She stepped forward, voice lower now, more intimate, more dangerous. "I watched guests of color go ignored. Watch staff delay service, withhold perks, use coded language when no one was supposed to hear. I listened to conversations in corridors where people joked about those types. I was treated like I didn't belong. On my own ship." The room held its breath. Tina crossed her arms. "So what happens now?" Sophia looked at her for a long time. Not angry, just resolved. "What happens now," she said, "is reckoning." By noon, she had called a full senior management meeting. Captain Marcus Ellery arrived late, as usual, still composed, still carrying the weight of someone used to being above question. "Miss Raynor," he began with forced courtesy. "If you'd given me advance notice, you would have hidden everything," she said, eyes unmoved. The room was quiet. "I've heard how you've run this ship," she continued. "Detached, hands off, selectively attentive. You've let this culture fester because you believed it didn't concern you." He bristled. "That's not fair." "It is fair. And you'll answer for it." She turned to the rest. No more whispers. No more complaints lost in HR. "Today, we reset." She handed out letters, reviews, evidence, written complaints, and, yes, terminations. Not out of rage, but necessity. Some were asked to step down. Others like Kai, Maria, and Javi were invited to help rebuild. She wasn't clearing the deck for revenge. She was clearing it for rebirth. That evening, Sophia stood again on the deck, not as Kara Dawson, not just as a CEO, but as a woman who had faced the worst version of her legacy and chosen not to run. Gregory joined her quietly. How did they take it? He asked, like people who've been too comfortable for too long, she said. But they'll adjust, or they'll leave. He nodded. You know what they'll remember most. What that for 1 week? A woman they forgot remembered all of them. Sophia smiled, soft but real. No, she said. They'll remember who I really am. And the name they forgot, Sophia Raynor, was no longer hiding. The waves outside the Isla Mariner rolled with gentle persistence, but inside, the air had shifted like the first gust of wind after a long, stagnant summer. Something had broken open, and it wasn't just silence. Sophia Raynor didn't waste time. By mid-morning, she had converted the captain's conference suite into a temporary command center. The large glass table, once used for luxury booking presentations, now held manila folders, stacks of crew evaluations, and a growing list titled Immediate Actions. Kai Ellison arrived first, uncertain, a clipboard in hand. Sophia nodded at him, already on the phone with the human resources director back on shore. She spoke clearly, calmly, but with no room for negotiation. No, Helen, I don't want the next onboarding cycle to lean into client-facing etiquette. I want a bias training module developed by Friday. Real training, not optics. She ended the call and turned to Kai. How many crew members responded to the anonymous survey? He glanced at the sheet. 32 so far. 21 mentioned witnessing bias or unfair treatment. 7 named specific crew members. 2 mentioned Tina by name. Sophia nodded. We'll need more. Extend the deadline another 48 hours. Add an option for one-on-one sessions. Kai hesitated. Do you think they'll be honest? If they believe we're actually listening, they will? Captain Marcus Ellery arrived late again. This time, however, he didn't hide behind protocol. His uniform was perfect, as always, but his posture carried the discomfort of a man unused to being questioned. You've made quite an impression, he said, as he entered the suite. Sophia didn't look up. And you've made quite a mess. He crossed his arms. With all due respect, this isn't how leadership works. You've shaken morale. Guests are noticing. Some staff are panicked. Sophia finally looked at him. Leadership isn't about keeping people comfortable. It's about making people better. He stiffened. I've run this vessel for over a decade. No major incidents. No guest revolts. You show up undercover for a few days and suddenly it's all fire and brimstone. No, she said calmly. It's truth. Finally spoken. There was a long pause. Ellery's voice lowered. You're going to lose people. Only the ones who never belonged here. That afternoon, Sophia held her first all-staff meeting in the atrium lounge. Not just senior staff. Not just those in suits or epaulettes. Everyone. The room filled slowly, some skeptical, some hopeful, some simply exhausted. Sophia stood in front of the grand piano, without a microphone. Her voice didn't need amplification. You may be wondering what happens next, she began. A few nodded. Most waited. First, you need to know this. I didn't come here to punish. I came here to protect what we built before we lost sight of it. She looked around the room. So many faces. So many stories she didn't know. When I launched Raynor Voyages, I didn't imagine 6-star ratings or marble bathrooms. I imagined something simpler, a place where people felt seen. Every guest, every crew member, not just tolerated, valued. She let that hang in the air. And somewhere along the way, we got lost. We started confusing luxury with exclusion, elegance with entitlement. Some crew looked down. A few blinked quickly. But here's the good news. She continued. Culture can be rebuilt. And it starts today. The new directives were clear: mandatory inclusivity and empathy training across all departments. A rotating crew feedback committee with direct access to executive leadership. An anonymous system for reporting bias with protection for whistleblowers. Review and restructuring of guest interaction policies. And, Sophia added, from this moment forward, no guest should receive better service because of how they look. Or worse, there was a murmur of agreement, not loud, but real. Then someone raised a hand, a junior steward named Alvin, no more than 20. What if we mess up? He asked. Sophia smiled gently. Then we learn. Together. After the meeting, Sophia returned to the deck for air. Gregory was there. As always, like a lighthouse she didn't know she needed. He didn't speak right away, just handed her a small, folded piece of paper. She opened it. A poem, handwritten, titled Legacy Isn't Stone. It is not the walls you build, nor the name they carve in brass. Legacy is who remembers you when they no longer have to. Sophia held it tightly. I wrote it last night, Gregory said, after everything. She turned to him, voice quiet. Thank you. He nodded. It's not for me. It's for them. The ones who'll stay. The ones who'll grow. She looked out at the sea. It was calm now, but not still. Just like her. Back in the conference suite, she updated the whiteboard with new initiatives. Maria and Javi joined her eyes, still cautious, but more open. This is your ship too, she told them. Not just the guests. Not just mine. Javi spoke first. You really think we can change the whole thing? Sophia looked at both of them. No, I don't think we can. A beat. I know we will. Change doesn't arrive like a trumpet. It begins quietly in glances that linger longer, in apologies that don't sound rehearsed, in shoulders that no longer hunch from the fear of being seen. That's how it started aboard the Isla Mariner. The same staff who once moved like wind-up dolls through hallways now walked with something new in their posture: uncertainty. Yes, but also awareness. Some wore it uneasily, like a suit not yet tailored. Others, like Kai, wore it with the ease of someone finally speaking in their native tongue. Kai had taken on more than Sophia expected. By week's end, he was leading informal debriefs among the younger crew, moments of reflection after shifts, small gatherings in the staff lounge where silence had once been currency. It's not about being perfect, he told them. It's about noticing and not ignoring. Sophia attended one of those meetings, quietly sitting near the back. She listened as Maria spoke about the first time she'd noticed herself skipping over certain guests, not out of hate, but from habit taught by example. I thought I was being efficient, she said. Now I think I was being afraid. And Javi shared how he'd stopped two engineers from mocking a guest's accent, something he wouldn't have dared to do just a week before. They didn't push back, he said. They just went quiet. Sophia didn't speak that evening, but as she left, she caught Kai's eye. He nodded once, not in greeting, but in trust. The formal retraining had also begun. Sophia brought in facilitators, professionals in hospitality, diversity, empathy-led leadership, no flashy consultants, no generic slideshows, real people with real stories. The sessions didn't start with rules, they started with questions. What was the last time you felt invisible? What does respect feel like? Some rolled their eyes at first, others sat stiffly, but over time, something softened. Tina Morales had once ruled those rooms with an icy efficiency. But now, Alvin, the young steward who'd spoken up, found himself co-leading a workshop with Kai, guiding staff through role plays and group reflection. Leadership doesn't always come with stripes, Sophia said during one session. Sometimes it starts with a question nobody else dared to ask. The guest experience began to shift too. It was subtle, and that made it powerful. The black couple who had once waited 20 minutes for breakfast were now seated with care and dignity. Sophia noticed how Gregory was offered the wine list without prompting, and the Middle Eastern family who'd been overlooked on the beach excursion, they received a personal invitation to the captain's dinner. Captain Ellery remained reserved, but even he had begun arriving on time, speaking more to the crew, asking questions. Sophia didn't expect a transformation from him, but perhaps a thaw. She saw him one afternoon standing beside Javi, watching the crew clean the deck. Sometimes, Ellery said quietly, the shine fades from the wrong places first. Javi didn't answer, but his presence was enough. Sophia had her moments of doubt still. One evening, she walked the promenade alone, the sea dark and still. Stars flickered above, and the hum of engines pulsed like a heartbeat. She sat on a bench, notebook open in her lap. She had written so many things over the last week: names, events, ideas, disappointments. But tonight, she just wrote one sentence. What if it's not enough? She didn't hear Gregory approach. He sat beside her like a memory returning at the right time. Still carrying it all, he asked. She handed him the notebook. He read the sentence, then closed it gently. It's enough for now, he said. And if you keep going, it becomes more than enough. She nodded, the night air cool on her skin. Do you think they'll remember this week, she asked? Gregory smiled. They'll remember what changed them. The final day of the cruise came with an unexpected email to all guests. It was signed by Sophia Raynor herself. She didn't explain her undercover presence. She didn't name names. She simply wrote, "You may have noticed things shifting aboard the Isla Mariner." That was intentional. Hospitality is not about perfection. It's about presence, about people. We are listening. We are learning. And we are committed to becoming a place where every guest and every crew member is honored. The response was overwhelming. Some replied with gratitude, others with surprise. One note stood out. Thank you for not hiding behind the brand. You reminded us that luxury means nothing if it doesn't begin with dignity. That afternoon, Sophia stood with her core team on the observation deck. Not a victory speech, not a press release, just people who had weathered a storm together, not of sea, but of conscience. Maria leaned against the rail, watching the shoreline approach. I used to think we were just here to polish silver, she said. Kai grinned. Now we polish souls. They laughed. The sound light and real. Even Javi chuckled. Don't tell Tina that, she'll trademark it. Sophia smiled, her arms folded gently. No trademarks, she said. Only truths. The Isla Mariner pulled into port with the sun high above, casting light on every corner, nothing hidden, nothing denied. And below deck, above deck, in the hearts of the people aboard, something had changed. Not everything, but something. And something, when nurtured, becomes everything. The last morning on the Isla Mariner arrived quietly. No fanfare, no dramatic music, just the rhythmic sound of the sea brushing against the hull and the slow movement of a ship approaching the mainland, not just a harbor, but a threshold. Sophia Raynor stood on the observation deck, hands resting on the rail. The sunlight danced across the water, casting golden ripples that stretched all the way to shore. She breathed in slowly, letting the salt and silence settle inside her. It wasn't closure she felt, it was readiness. Below deck, the crew moved with renewed rhythm. There were still missteps, a forgotten name, an awkward interaction, but they were trying. Trying mattered now. Sophia passed the staff hallway and saw a handwritten note taped to the message board. It read, "See someone. Say something. Help each other rise. No signature, just belief." Captain Marcus Ellery approached her later that morning. He didn't offer his usual stiff salute. Instead, he handed her a small leather-bound journal, the ship's logbook. "I reviewed every incident you documented," he said, "including the ones I overlooked." Sophia accepted the book. "I can't promise I'll be the leader you want overnight," he said, eyes steady, "but I'll start listening, not just to you, to them." She nodded, and for the first time, offered her hand. Then we're already ahead of where we were. At disembarkation, guests lined up near the gangway, their luggage neatly packed, their conversations low but contented. Sophia stood near the railing, watching as Gregory Cheney stepped off the yacht with his straw hat in hand. He turned, one last time. "You didn't just change their uniforms," he said. "You changed their hearts." Sophia smiled, still a work in progress. He chuckled. "The best things always are." Kai walked up behind her, his face tanned from days in the sun and conversations that mattered. "Feels different now," he said. "It is," she replied, "because of all of you." He looked out toward the crowd. "What happens when the next storm comes?" Sophia paused. "We stay the course." As the final guests stepped off and the crew gathered for their final meeting, Sophia stood once more before them. No speech, no notes, just her voice and what it had come to mean. "Some of you may still be unsure, some may be tired, but look around you. We didn't wait for permission to change. We chose better. Together." She gestured to the floor, to the deck that held their footsteps. "This place is no longer just polished wood and velvet lounges. It's a place where people are seen, where dignity is expected, not earned." There was no applause, just stillness. The kind of stillness that means something sacred has been spoken. That evening, as the yacht emptied and the sun melted into the horizon, Sophia took her seat at the end of the dock, shoes off, legs curled beneath her, notebook in lap. She wrote, "True luxury isn't what we serve. It's how we make people feel when they're finally seen." Then she closed the book. The tide was rising. But this time, it wasn't something to fear. It was something to follow. At any age, we're faced with moments that quietly ask us, will you speak? Or will you stay silent? Sophia Raynor's journey is more than a story of corporate reform. It's a mirror held to the heart of anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or unseen. For those of us who have lived long enough to witness change in people, in systems, in ourselves, this story reminds us that real transformation doesn't always come with applause. It often begins in discomfort, in listening when it's easier to walk away, in choosing truth over tradition. Sophia didn't rebuild her company with fury. She rebuilt it with grace, listening to those without titles, empowering voices that had long been muted. That's a lesson for families, communities, and even our own inner lives. Because no matter how old we are, it's never too late to ask, is this the legacy I want to leave? And more importantly, what can I still change today? Thank you for taking the time to watch and stay with this heartfelt story. If Sophia Raynor's journey touched something in you, if you believe that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and respected, then help us share that message. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak to the quiet strength in all of us. Your support means the world. See you in the next story.